Hello students, welcome to Byju's IS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up some of the very important articles which have appeared in various business related newspapers and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've chosen the time period from 5th of October to 11th of October 2020, and the articles that I've chosen are from Business Line, Hindu, Business Standard, Indian Express and LiveMint. Let's begin the discussion. The first article is related to compensation cess. In the earlier videos, we have already discussed what is happening with respect to GST compensation in the present scenario. That is basically, Government of India had promised the states that cess will be paid in case of any GST under recovery or under collection for a period of 5 years. We implemented GST from 2017. So from 2017 to 2022, Government of India has promised the states that it will be providing any kind of a GST compensation if at all the states do not collect appropriate number of GST revenue. Now, earlier what has happened is because of the pandemic, because of the slowdown and recession, the GST collection has come down, and from 1 year to next year, the GST expected revenue collection has increased as per the calculation. So the compensation which is supposed to be paid by the center to the states comes somewhere in the tune of around 2.35 lakh crore rupees. Now, there has been a lot of discussion with respect to whether the full amount has to be paid by the center or only the part amount has to be paid by the center. Because central government basically said only part of this particular 2.35 lakh crore rupees is because of the implementation of GST, and rest of the tax revenue collection, which is a shortfall, is because of the pandemic. Now, after discussing this for many months, Government of India stated the states can borrow from to the tune of 1.1 lakh crore rupees, and any borrowing that is done by the states for the year 2021, that is the financial year 2021, the principal amount as well as the interest amount shall be repaid by the central government. Now understand this, within this particular payment which is done by the central government, now the central government is saying whatever payment will be done by it will not be paid from consolidated fund of India. Rather, the central government has decided to extend the compensation cess which is imposed under GST for next couple of years, that is expected to be for 2 years. Any collection that is done in the form of a GST cess will be utilized to repay this particular amount. So in a nutshell, Government of India has decided to extend the cess, the application of the cess, and collect the revenue, use this particular revenue to repay the borrowing done by the state in this particular financial year because of a GST revenue shortfall. So this is the basic discussion that has been provided in this particular newspaper article. The next article is with respect to natural gas. Now, first and foremost, some of the very important points are India somewhere produces around 84 MMS CMD units of natural gas. MMS CMD basically stands for million metric tons standard cubic meters per day. This is a basic methodology or basic unit of measurement here. So India produces around 84 MMS CMD and imports somewhere around 80 plus units of natural gas into India. Now, out of all this particular natural gas which is either produced or imported, please understand, Government of India utilizes two formulas or two methodologies to price them. In case of the first, basically Government of India follows something called as administered pricing mechanism. And in case of the remaining amount of natural gas which is sold in the market, Government of India has allowed the private sector units to decide the pricing of the natural gas. But please understand, this particular freedom to the private sector companies was introduced very recently post 2016 by the Government of India. With respect to administered pricing mechanism, Government of India introduced this particular formula in the year 2014. Now, in case of administered pricing mechanism, which is usually decided once every 6 months by Government of India, that is on 1st of April and 1st of October. With a gap of 6 months, Government of India decides the prices of these particular natural gas units which are sold in the market. And this particular pricing is determined by taking into consideration 4 benchmarks. These particular 4 benchmarks are 1. Alberta gas, from Canada, Henry gas in USA, Russian gas, and ABP gas from UK. So these are the four benchmarks which are taken into consideration. What was the price of these particular four benchmarks or the gas benchmarks in the last 1 year is taken into consideration, and the average price is used to determine what will be the administered pricing of the natural gas in the Indian market. This is one point. In addition to this, whatever is the price, that is administered price, that is decided usually is implemented with a gap or with a lag of 1 quarter. Let me explain what is the meaning of this. For example, imagine Government of India decides the administered price of a natural gas on 1st April. So the calculation will be done somewhat like this. What is the average price of these particular four benchmarks for the last 1 year, that is from 1st January to 31st December of last year. The average pricing is taken into consideration, calculated, and that will be the administered price which is implemented from 1st April of this particular year. So with a lag of 1 quarter, whatever is the average price of these particular four benchmarks in the last 1 year will be implemented in case of India. So this is the basic introduction to the concept of a natural gas in India. Now, what has been done very recently by Government of India? Government of India has basically stated that now it will be basically introducing a new methodology wherein it has set up a new platform, and using this particular new platform, there will be bidding for the pricing of this particular natural gas. Again, lot of technical issues have been discussed in these particular kind of articles that is not required for UPSC. What you need to understand is this. Earlier, for some types of natural gas which is obtained in India, high pressure, high temperature natural gas which is obtained by the private sector companies, Government of India from 2016 allowed them to decide the prices. Whereas on the other side, there was an administered pricing mechanism which was calculated, implemented once every 6 months, using which the rest of the natural gas was sold and bought in the Indian market. And this particular concept of administered pricing mechanism was implemented by taking into consideration the average prices of the four benchmarks which are listed here, and implemented with a lag of 1 quarter, with a gap of 1 quarter. Now, why this particular decision of the Government of India is important? First and foremost, understand this. With this particular new methodology which has been announced by the government, using which there will be bidding for the natural gas and the prices will be decided, that is price at which the natural gas will be bought and sold. It is going to cover around 4/5 of the natural gas which is sold in India. In addition to this, it is expected that investment in this kind of a sector is expected to increase. In addition to the capacity of 80 units which is present in India, we are expecting a total of 140 units, that is MMS CMD, to be the total output because of this particular policy. In Kaveri Godavari basin itself, it is expected that because of this particular decision of the government, 40 units, that is 40 MMS CMD units will be supplied more to the domestic market. In addition to this, certain more important advantages are: one, understand this, since we are deciding the administered pricing in case of India and implemented with a lag of 1 quarter, various experts are saying that whatever is the pricing of the natural gas which is sold in the domestic market is not basically tracking the international prices. Because if international prices today, let's imagine, are increasing, but in the last 1 year, if the international prices had declined, then based on that particular parameter, those particular four benchmarks, the natural gas which is sold under the administered pricing mechanism could be lower. So basically, there's a mismatch between the prices of the natural gas which is sold in the domestic market, and it is not connected with whatever is the real-time natural gas prices in the international market. In addition to this, it is expected that because now the bidding is going to determine the prices of the natural gas or most of the natural gas, the prices will become real time, or prices will reflect the market situation. And in some of the sectors where natural gas is consumed, for example fertilizer, where majority of the cost price is because of the natural gas itself, the market prices will become more real or more reflective of the situation. And as a result of this, the cost of production because of the input such as natural gas will also be more reflective of the market prices. So these are some of the issues related to the concept of the natural gas which is being discussed in this particular article. So based on this particular discussion, I've given a question here. Consider the following statements. India imports more than 80% of its natural gas requirement. No, it is somewhere around 50%. So first statement is wrong. Government decides the pricing for all the natural gas that is sold in the Indian market. No, some of it is through administrative pricing mechanism, but some of this particular natural gas which is obtained through high pressure, high temperature areas or deep seas, etc. Under these particular situations, the private sector is allowed to determine the price. So second statement is also wrong. So right option will be option D. Both are false. Next article is related to masala bonds. Now first and foremost, let's understand the concept of masala bonds. Imagine there is a company X in India. This particular company, let's say, will borrow from the international market. Imagine it will go to the foreign market such as USA, will issue bonds in the foreign market and will raise, let's take a very simple number here, $100. And let's say right now the exchange rate is $1 is equal to 50 rupees. So in essence, if I convert this particular $100 into rupees, in essence I'm saying the Indian company has borrowed 5,000 rupees from USA market. Is it okay? I'm just converting these particular borrowings from dollar to rupee terms based on the current exchange rate. Now imagine they will borrow and after 1 year they're supposed to make the repayment. Forget about the coupon rate or interest rate here. What if after 1 year when this particular company is supposed to repay, or let's say after 3 years when they're supposed to repay, what if the exchange rate is $1 is equal to 60 rupees? So in essence they will have to repay $100. To repay $100, this particular company has to pay how much? 6,000 rupees to purchase $100. Because when they are supposed to repay, the exchange rate has changed to how much? $1 is equal to 60. That is in simple terms, when the domestic companies are borrowing from the external market in terms of the foreign currencies, or else I'll use a technical statement here. When the bonds are issued with an underlying value in a foreign currency, then the repayment will involve an exchange rate risk. If the domestic currency depreciates, then basically the domestic company which has borrowed from the foreign market will have to pay a huge amount of a sum. I'm not even considering the concept of an interest or coupon rate here, right? Because in addition to this particular 6,000 rupees, the domestic company has to pay interest. That is in addition to this. But the principal alone will face a huge amount of risk because of an exchange rate risk. Now, some of you will simply say, sir, the currency can move from the other side also. That is, rather than rupee depreciating, it can appreciate also. Yes, that is also possible. And generally, it has been seen that Indian rupee has been depreciating against a foreign currency such as dollar. For example, between 2016 to 2018, rupee depreciated from 64 to 66 rupees. That is, for every dollar, the exchange rate was 64 to 66. It slipped by this much amount. And between 2018 to 2020, it has further slipped to around 70 rupees per dollar. So when rupee has been depreciating like this, the domestic companies which are borrowed from the external market in terms of foreign currencies will feel the pain of a repayment. In order to address these kind of issues, what RBI has done is it has introduced a concept such as masala bonds. Understand this? Although I'm saying RBI has introduced this, in reality, for the first time, masala bonds were introduced in 2014 and 2015, and it was introduced by Government of India as well as IEFC, International Finance Corporation. After this, these particular kinds of masala bonds are being promoted by the domestic regulator, which is RBI. Now, what is the idea of a masala bond? Generally, when the domestic company borrows from the foreign market, it borrows in the foreign currencies, or the underlying value of the asset will be in the form of foreign currencies. But in case of these kind of bonds, which are masala bonds, the Indian company will borrow from the foreign market, but in terms of rupees. The borrowing will be done in terms of rupees and the repayment will also be done in terms of rupees. Now let me explain. Imagine the same company X will go to USA. Now rather than issuing a bond in terms of dollars, the domestic company will issue the bonds in terms of rupees. Let's say 100 rupees. And will also pay the coupon rate or interest rate in terms of rupees. Is it okay? Borrowing, coupon payment as well as the principal repayment, everything will be done in terms of rupees itself. These kind of bonds which are issued offshore by the domestic companies, Offshore means outside India. These kind of bonds which are issued by Indian companies in an offshore market where underlying value of the asset in terms of rupees, these kind of bonds are called as masala bonds. Now, why these are specifically called as masala bonds? As per the practice or the convention is that the prefix or the term which is used before the term bond should represent certain feature of a country. For example, in case of India, one feature that is usually associated or culinary feature that is associated with Indian food is masala. Hence, we call these particular bonds as masala bonds. And in the international market, the moment any investor hears the term masala bond, by default, he'll understand that these particular bonds are issued in terms of rupee. Repayment are done in terms of rupee. In the same way, there are dim sum bonds. These are issued by Chinese companies. There are samurai bonds issued by Japanese companies. There are baklava bonds which are issued by Turkish companies, etc. So generally what we do is, when the domestic companies of respective countries issue the bonds in an offshore market but in the domestic currency, where the underlying value of the asset is in domestic currency, we will use a specific feature of a respective country from which the bonds are being issued. These kind of bonds are very famous right now. Now coming back to the discussion with respect to masala bonds, although these were issued for the first time in 2014 and 2015, the demand for these kind of bonds over a period of time has been waning. Masala bonds are issued under the concept of ECB, external commercial borrowing, but the demand for the masala bonds has been waning in the last couple of years. The reason for this particular decline in the interest for the masala bonds is rupee depreciation. Second is the use of rupee as international currency. Let me start with the first one. In case of a rupee depreciation, if I followed the discussion, I said if it is a domestic borrower, when the rupee depreciates, his repayment will increase. And in case of masala bond, remember one very important feature related to this. In case of masala bond, since the domestic company or let's say Indian company is issuing in terms of rupees, repaying in terms of rupees, the exchange rate risk will be borne by the foreign investor. I'll repeat the statement here. In case of masala bonds, these particular bonds are issued by Indian companies in an overseas market, let's say USA. The exchange rate risk with respect to their investment will be borne by the foreign investor himself, not by the Indian company. Now, some of you will basically say, if there is an exchange rate risk which is borne by the investor, sir, why will the investor invest in these particular bonds in the first place? The catch for these investors is the interest rate or coupon rate is higher. Is it okay? The interest rate or the coupon rate, that is in simple terms, how much they are earning in terms of interest rate, the rate is higher. For example, in case of a developed economies, generally the interest rates are lower, and an Indian company goes to that particular market and issues a bond where the coupon rate or interest rate is, let's say, in the range of 7% to 10%. So have a look at this. In one market where interest rates are lesser, a foreign company is coming and offering, let's say, 8% rate of interest. Don't you think foreign investors would be tempted to invest in these kind of bonds? And obviously market mantra is what? Higher the returns, higher will be the risk. The foreign investors will have to bear the exchange rate risk in case of masala bonds. Now, why the demand for these kind of bonds are coming down? First reason, rupee is getting depreciated. Now, what is the impact of this on a foreign investor? Let me explain. Imagine right now the exchange rate is $1 is equal to 50 rupees. Just a hypothetical number. $1 is equal to 50 rupees. And you go to a foreign market, borrow 100 rupees from that particular market. And present exchange rate, since it is $1 is equal to 50 rupees, can I simply say that it is equivalent to foreign investor investing $2 in this particular bond? Now, what if you are repaying this particular 100 rupees after 3 years? And after 3 years, let's take a extreme exchange rate just for sake of simple calculation. What if the exchange rate has changed to $1 is equal to 100 rupee? So what has happened? You will have to return the 100 rupee to the investor. But at that point of a time, that is after 3 years, exchange rate is $1 is equal to 100. So in effect, he will be getting how much back? He will be getting only $1 back. While investing, he has invested $2. But right now, after 3 years, he is going to receive only $1. Don't you think that is a danger for the investor? Definitely yes. And what has happened in this particular situation? Rupee has depreciated. When rupee depreciates, part of the principal which has been invested, right, it will be eaten up by this particular rupee depreciation. And in the recent times, as earlier mentioned, rupee has been depreciating. So foreign investors are concerned about the returns that they are going to get. That's the first very important reason why the demand for these kind of bonds has been coming down. Second very important reason is, in the international market, rupee as a mode of an exchange has not been used very frequently. The demand for rupees in the international market as a currency is very lesser compared to, let's say, universal currencies such as dollar. And the third very important reason is, initially when these particular bonds were launched, the interest rate or coupon rates were higher. But in recent times, the domestic companies which are issuing these particular masala bonds, they have started reducing the coupon rates. So these are the three very important reasons why the demand for masala bonds had been coming down, and the preference of masala bonds was lesser compared to other forms of external commercial borrowing. But very recently, that is in the current financial year itself, the article says that the issues of masala bonds have increased. Now, what amount of masala bonds have been issued, that is not important here. How many issues have been done, not important. What we have discussed, concept of masala bonds, and why the demand for masala bonds was reducing is important. In addition to this, what is the use of a masala bond? First and foremost, for domestic borrower, rather than borrowing from any other source in different currencies, it becomes easier for the domestic borrower to borrow in the domestic currency itself. Second, these kind of bonds, they can bring it and invest in infrastructure in India. So these are some of the advantages which are associated with the concept of masala bonds. In addition to this, also remember this, masala bonds can be used in reducing the current account deficit, in controlling rupee depreciation, because suddenly UPSC might use these kind of statements in the prelims. So remember, these are also the advantages associated with the masala bonds. So this is a discussion related to the article. Based on this, I have given a question here. Consider the following statements. Masala bonds were issued for the first time in 2014 and 15, correct? In case of masala bonds, these are issued and are repaid in dollars, wrong. Issued and repaid in rupees. So first statement is true. Option A is the right option here. The next article is related to World Bank report. In this particular report, certain very important points have been mentioned. Please focus on only those particular points. First and foremost, the article says, or the report mentions, that earlier World Bank had estimated that Indian economy would be contracting by 3.2% for the current fiscal. But now this has been revised to 9.6% for the current fiscal. This is the first point. Second point, in the next fiscal, that is the financial year 2022, the report estimates that Indian economy would be bouncing back with a growth rate of 5.4%. Third point, the impact of the COVID is dependent on certain very important factors on the Indian economy. First and foremost, how the households, companies will adjust to the unlockdown or revising of these particular guidelines which are being done by the government. Second point, what will be the tenure of the impact of the COVID and to what extent it is going to affect various sectors. And the third very important point, to what extent the counter-cyclical fiscal policy will be having an impact on the economy. So these three factors will have an impact on what kind of a growth will be achieved by the Indian economy. Hence, the report also says that because of these three factors, there is uncertainty associated with this particular growth rate for the next or the coming financial year. The fourth very important point which has been mentioned with respect to borrowings or the debt of the government. The report mentions that the overall deficit, that is a fiscal deficit for all the states, is expected to be around 4.5% for financial year 21, and overall fiscal deficit for center as well as state will be somewhere around 12% of GDP, again for the same financial year, and the overall debt is expected to be around 94% for the financial year 23. So these are the four very important points which have been mentioned in the report. Now let's go to the next article. There has been a lot of discussion with respect to giving or government providing MSP guarantee. Now understand the concept in the first place. Government of India has introduced certain amendments to the agriculture laws. One law basically with respect to trade and commerce in the agriculture commodities allows the farmers to sell their commodities outside or within the APMC mandis. Earlier, what was the concept? The first sales of these particular notified commodities will have to be sold within the APMC mandi. The government of India, by introducing this particular law or reform, has given the choice to the farmer. He can sell his agriculture commodity in any market within the same state, outside the state, within the APMC mandi, outside the APMC mandi. Now, with the introduction of this, there is a concern that government of India may withdraw the concept of MSP. Now, what is the idea of MSP? Whenever government will procure the notified food grains from the farmers, government will provide a guaranteed price. This particular price is called as minimum support price. The government generally announces MSP for 23 crops, but the procurement is centered in rice and wheat. So the concern is that with the option being given to the farmers, they might start selling their commodities outside the APMC mandis. And when they will sell to any other buyer, or let's say the middleman in the market, there is no guarantee that the buyer is going to pay them MSP. There is no guarantee because it is being sold outside the APMC and the private sector buyer is buying the commodity. Now, what if the government of India, that is FCI, will procure the food grains from this particular buyer? Let's imagine the MSP which is announced by the government is a hypothetical number here, 2000 rupees, and this particular buyer will purchase the agriculture commodity from the farmer at 1500 rupees, and when FCI procures from the buyer, it will pay him 1700 rupees. So whatever trade has been done in the market, that is in simple terms, whatever money has been received by the farmer in the market is much lesser than the MSP. Government will procure the crop much lesser or at a price lesser than the MSP. Farmer is not going to receive MSP. And over a period of time, government may simply withdraw this particular idea or the announcement of MSP itself. So this has been one point of a discussion, and this has been the point where the farmers have been opposing this particular agriculture reforms which are announced by the central government. Now, this particular article discusses certain very important issues related to concept of MSP and says that if government of India goes ahead and agrees to this particular demand of making MSP guarantee, then it will not be addressing the issue, rather it will be creating certain problems in the market. What are the issues which are flagged in this particular article with respect to guaranteeing MSP for the farmers? First and foremost, the article says that the government of India announces MSP for 23 crops. The procurement is centered only on rice and wheat. And the procurement is basically centered for rice and wheat in top 5 to top 7 states in India. Now, if government of India provides an MSP guarantee, which means when they procure it, right, they will have to pay the MSP within the APMC or outside of the APMC. Now, if they are going to pay MSP, then obviously cultivation of these particular crops will increase. For example, cultivation of rice and wheat will increase. And generally, these particular crops are associated with higher consumption of fertilizer or utilization of fertilizer, higher consumption of irrigation, that is water consumption is higher, electricity that is used for irrigation consumption is also higher. So what this particular article says is, if government of India at all provides MSP guarantee for these kind of crops and starts procuring and pays MSP to all the sellers, then consumption of fertilizer might increase, consumption of water might increase, and whenever the consumption of fertilizer and water keeps on increasing, it will have certain negative impact on overall environment. For example, when there is a huge consumption of nitrogenous based fertilizers, you might see certain impact in the water ponds such as eutrophication. So there are certain negative environmental effect that can be caused because of this particular policy, if at all it is announced. That is the first. Second one, if government announces MSP guarantee for the crops and starts procuring the crops, there will be sudden shortage of crops in the market. That is, a farmer will take all his crops, sell it to the government at MSP. Now what will happen as a result of this? The supply of the crops to the market will be lesser. When the supply of crops to the market becomes lesser and lesser, what do you think will happen to prices? So obviously the prices in the market will also start increasing. This is another very important point which has been mentioned in this particular article if the MSP guarantee is provided by the government. Third, if government announces a guaranteed MSP, then basically the fiscal burden on the government will also start increasing. So these are the three issues which have been flagged by this particular author with respect to the demand of the other parties which are calling for Government of India announcing an MSP guarantee for their crops. So this particular article in simple one-line statement says that even if Government of India provides an MSP guarantee, that is not going to solve the issues that are being faced by the farmers in the market. Now, the next article is related to monetary policy review, which was done very recently by newly constituted Monetary Policy Committee. Now, what are the very important points from this particular article that you need to understand? First and foremost, a new Monetary Policy Committee has been constituted. Monetary Policy Committee will consist of 6 members, 3 are from RBI and remaining 3 are the experts who are appointed by Government of India. And these 3 new experts who are appointed by Government of India are Ashima Goyal, Jayant R. Verma, Shashanka Bhide. These are the 3 experts who have been appointed by Government of India for this particular Monetary Policy Committee. Next very important point. What has been the announcements done in this particular Monetary Policy Review Committee? First and foremost, the Monetary Policy Committee has stated that, or I'll keep on supplementing or substituting the term Monetary Policy Review Committee with RBI. So RBI basically stated that it will do everything in its power to promote growth in the domestic market and to control volatility. Second, it has basically stated that inflation which is present in the domestic market right now is a temporary phenomenon, because in the recent months, if you have seen, though the target range which has been provided for the Monetary Policy Committee is 2 to 6%, in recent months the inflation rate has been trading or trending above 6% and even 7% now. So RBI in simple terms has stated this is a temporary phenomenon. Fourth quarter or after December, this particular inflation rate is expected to cool down. Next very important point. Indian economy is experiencing a contraction, and the Monetary Policy Review Committee has stated that this particular contraction is expected to end from the 4th quarter of the current fiscal, and after that we may start experiencing a positive growth rate in the Indian economy. In addition to this, the RBI has stated that they will continue with the accommodative policy. This is also very, very important. Please understand, it sends a signal to the market that RBI is not going to change its policy stance. Because earlier there was a concern in the market that RBI might change its stance from accommodative to neutral stance. But allaying the fears of the market, RBI has stated they are going to continue with the accommodative stance, which basically means in the coming days, there is a possibility of a rate cut by RBI. Next, what are the most important announcements? What has been done by RBI in the recently concluded review to address certain issues in the market? First and foremost, state development loans. And what is the concept of a state development loans? These are the bonds which are issued by the state government. Okay, central government will issue treasury bills and dated securities. Treasury bills usually have a maturity period of up to 1 year. Dated securities have maturity period of more than 1 year. So these are the types of bonds which are issued, that is dated securities are the types of bonds which are issued by the central government. In the same way, state governments are allowed to issue state development loans. Until now, please understand this, there was no secondary market for these particular state development loans. Means what? Central government will issue treasury bills and the dated securities. RBI would repurchase them as and when the situation changed. But with respect to state development loans, there is no secondary market. In essence, RBI was not involved in repurchasing of these particular bonds. So there was a concern with respect to state governments issuing huge amount of state development loans to borrow from the market. So for the first time, RBI has announced that it will be conducting repurchasing of a state development loan. This to a very great extent is a very good measure of RBI and will be allowing the state governments to issue more bonds in the market, because now the market knows that if the bonds are too many of the state government, RBI will step in and repurchase these particular bonds. There is no concern with respect to these particular bonds in the market. Next, with respect to housing loans. In case of housing loans, earlier the risk weightage was determined based on the amount of a loan that was given in addition to loan to value ratio, LTV. Now what RBI has done is, rather than deciding the risk weightage for a housing loan based on 2 parameters, henceforth it will be decided based only on the loan to value ratio. What is the advantage of this? With change in this particular methodology, it is expected that the risk weightage for these kind of loans is going to come down, When risk weightage is going to come down, the capital that has to be maintained by the bank for these kind of loans will also come down. When the requirement of capital is expected to come down, the banks are expected to give more loans in this particular segment. And the next one, TLTRO, targeted long-term repo operations. Under this, the RBI will be lending to banks for a period of 1 year to 3 years. Any amount of borrowing that is done by banks under this particular route will be used to borrow investment grade securities or bonds in the market. The advantage is, understand this, it was announced much earlier also. RBI wanted to ensure that the money will flow into specific sectors where these particular sectors are feeling the heat of the financials or cash crunch. But RBI itself has stated that whatever objective was set up by RBI, it has not been achieved. Hence, under the latest TLTRO, RBI has specifically stated that certain sectors will be targeted under this particular route now. So these are some of the announcements. Another very important announcement is with respect to RTGS, real-time gross settlement. Under the concept of RTGS, henceforth, this particular methodology of fund transfers will be available 24/7. That is basically from December. Now, please understand the two very important tools to transfer funds are, one is NEFT, National Electronic Fund Transfer, and the second one is RTGS. And apart from this, there are many more. For example, you must have heard of IMPS also. Now, with respect to NEFT, under this particular NEFT, whenever the funds are transferred, basically there was a time lag. Starting from 1 rupee, any amount could be transferred under NEFT, but there was a time lag here. Certain amount of time will be taken because these particular transactions are cleared in batches. But this particular route, last year, RBI made it available 24/7 and reduced the charges on this. Now, in order to promote large value transactions, because under RTGS, that is real-time gross settlement, usually the minimum value of transaction should be 2 lakh rupees. So this particular RTGS is used generally for high value transaction. So what RBI has done is, it has made even this particular RTGS 24/7 from December. And right now it is available from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. It will be made 24/7 available from December. So this will also promote digital transactions in the coming days. So these are some of the very important decisions that have been taken in the recently concluded Monetary Policy Review Committee. Now, very recently there has been a lot of discussion with respect to some of the very important terms as to how Indian economy, or for that matter global economy, will recover. You must have heard of a V-shaped recovery, U-shaped recovery, W-shaped recovery, so on and so forth. Now, suddenly in the UPSC, he might use these kind of statements in the prelims. So you need to understand what is the importance or what is the meaning of each of the terms. First and foremost, what is the meaning of a K-shaped recovery? Now, let me draw a graph here. Here I'll write a time period and here I'll write a GDP. Whenever I say K-shaped recovery, usually different sectors in the economy will recover at different rates. I'll repeat the statement here. K-shaped recovery means different sectors in the economy will recover at different rates. Some of the sectors will recover at much higher positive rates, and some of the sectors will experience a decline in their growth and will experience a negative growth rate. For example, if you see in the last couple of months, some of the sectors such as healthcare, food production, etc. are experiencing a positive growth rate. On the other hand, some of the services sectors such as tourism, hotel, etc. are experiencing a negative growth rate. So can you see this particular shape? This kind of a recovery is called as a K-shaped recovery. What about V-shaped recovery? Same graph here, GDP, time. In case of V-shaped recovery, there is a sudden crash like this and sudden recovery which is going to happen. I'll repeat the statement here. There's a sudden crash which happens in the market, that is, economy will fall into recession, and again there is a very fast recovery also. This kind of a recovery is called as a V-shaped recovery. Right? In case of a U-shaped recovery, again the concept of application of V-shape only, but in case of a U-shape, what will happen is the recovery will be taking place for a longer period of time. That is, it will take a very longer period of time for the economy to recover. For example, this is a U-shaped recovery, right? Again, the y-axis will be GDP and x-axis will be time taken. Here, the time taken for the recovery will be very, very long, and certain periods of time, again, there could be sudden fluctuations in the market like this, right? So this is what you will see in case of a U-shaped recovery. in case of a W-shaped recovery, which is also referred to as a double dip recession, what you'll see is GDP along y-axis and the time along the x-axis. You will see the economic crashing like this, recovering for a certain period of time, again crashing, again recovering. This is called as a W-shaped recovery. Now, why do you think this is going to happen? Right? This is also called as a double dip recession. Why do you think this is going to happen? It is going to happen for a simple reason. Take the example of India now or European market. Because of the pandemic, there was a contraction, right? Economy went into recession, recovery. What if there is a pandemic, second wave of pandemic, third wave of pandemic? The economy would be recovering, but because of certain hurdles, certain issues like this, again there will be a contraction in the economy, and later there will be again recovery in the market. This is called as a W-shaped recovery. Z-shaped recovery basically represents a recovery of like this. There is a crash like this, suddenly there is a huge recovery, and again to a certain extent there is a correction in the market. This is called as a Z-shaped recovery. Swoosh-shaped recovery. Basically, in case of a swoosh-shaped recovery, it basically denotes the Nike symbol. If you have seen Nike symbol, it will be like this, right? Now, what happens in here is there is a sudden crash like this, but to recover, there is a very long time period which is taken, right? This kind of a recovery is called as a swoosh-shaped recovery. And finally, inverse square root shaped recovery. Generally, square root representation is done like this. Just inverse it. That is a basic representation of a inverse square root shaped. It will be represented somewhat like this. GDP here, then time here. So basically, if economy is moving like this, then there's a sudden crash like this and recovery happens like this. But what is the importance of this particular inverse square root shaped here? The GDP growth rate earlier will be higher, but after recovery, it will be moving at a much lesser pace or at a lower pace, or else a technical term will be GDP growth rate will be moving at a step down phase compared to the pre-recession phase. This is called as inverse square root shaped recovery. So these are some of the very important terms, right? Very often used in the newspaper. UPSC might use these kind of statements or the terms in the UPSC prelims. Please be very, very careful. So this is a discussion with respect to this particular week. That's it for this particular video. Have a good day.